Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Red River Managed Services webinar. My name is Frank Lesko, and this is
Brian Charles.
It's great to see you again, Brian. We used to do this a lot, back in the day, but we have a great webinar for you today. We want to help try to share with you some of our thoughts around modernizing, securing, and scaling using Azure Virtual Desktop. So, Brian, I think it might be worth taking some time to do a little history on VDI, right? I mean, back in the day, I think I can go all the way back to the 90s, right? When VDI was supposed to be revolutionary and, game-changing, world-changing. But I know that, and you know that, a lot of things, or I should say a lot of challenges, came to the forefront with that technology.
Yeah.
Maybe it didn't work out quite as well as we might have expected.
Right? Yeah, so VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, isn't a new concept by any means. So way back when, even before personal computers existed, you had the terminal and the mainframe, and then the device you were using was only giving you access to that. So it's sort of a spiritual successor to how we used to do things. Then everyone got personal computers, and then we were working from here. But then as people started moving around and maybe working from home a little bit in the 2000s, you had services like Terminal Server that popped up, which were kind of similar. Citrix jumped into the game pretty early, and it was reintroducing that client server relationship that we used. When virtualization hit, I want to say in the early 2010s or so, that experience that people had for accessing your corporate environments from remote, they say, well, why can't we do that for everyone? It's going to simplify the end user experience, have more consistent, especially now we have different types of devices. Some people are from Windows, some people are from Mac. How do we control that? So that's kind of where VDI came from, and VMware and Citrix, again, were huge into that space with the Horizon and the Zen Desktop. Okay. Now, what ended up happening really is it didn't work the way most IT people expected. They were like, oh, this will solve all my end user problems because I don't have to worry about the endpoints anymore. But then they started looking at the barrier of entry there. So if you really wanted to build out a virtual desktop infrastructure, you're looking into very long assessments, a lot of money and effort going in up front. And then to actually do it, it was typically 6 to 7 figures to do it right, because you have lots of bottlenecks when you have everyone coming in. So it didn't take off the way it did. I mean, it did some places, there was some niche use cases, but it didn't really revolutionize or take over the market some people thought it would. And then here we are today where we're talking about it again all of a sudden.
Yeah, we're talking about it in the cloud now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the old story was, try to build that business case to your executives, and try to justify that initial expense, because it was pretty considerable. So now we're sitting here, right? We have cloud VDI, right? So, well, tell us about the advantages you see there, and maybe what some of the what challenges were kind of addressed because of it.
Yeah, immediately what cloud VDI does is lower that barrier of entry. Mm-hmm. And what's so nice about having that low barrier of entry, because the hyperscalers like AWS or Azure, you pay for what you use. So instead of putting a lot of time and effort into an assessment to say, will this potentially work, and then have this giant sign off before you can actually know if it's going to work, you get to taste it, stand up a few users, see if it's going to work, and then think about where could this fit inside my organization. So the velocity on it is just incredible. You could try it quickly, test it, and say, oh, that didn't work. We sunk 2 to 3 weeks, whatever. And then at the same time, scaling. Hyperscalers, you could scale basically infinitely. You're not going to drink more than someone else is. Mm-hmm. So all those resources are there, and the infrastructure is there. And if you build it correctly, you can scale to as much or as little of your environment as you need.
It is such an easier barrier to entry now. We've had conversations now with several customers, and we've launched a few proof of concepts and pilots, and we'll talk about those in a little more detail a little bit later in our conversation. But yeah, I really like what I'm seeing there. So where do you what kind of business cases do you think are best addressed by cloud VDI solutions now?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question, because when people hear about new technology, a lot of times people go, oh, well, how this can solve all my problems. Well, it's not going to solve every problem. At the same time, almost every organization probably could find some slice of life for this to help them out. Where we see it taking off a whole lot, a wide adoption, and we see it in healthcare or other regulated industries, because what it does is allow the new work from anywhere that most organizations, or hybrid work that almost every organization in the world is going to now. They're able to offer a secure interface into the environment, as almost as if the user was sitting at the office, or in some cases better experience than if the user was sitting inside the office, and not really care about that endpoint. So think about what that does for hardware procurement. Well, the last 2 years, we have a whole bunch of IT folks who are used to these devices coming into the office every day. Well, now we have to figure out, oh, what's everyone's home address? How do I get a new device out there? How do I so on and so forth? It eliminates a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that back and forth. So that secure interface inside of your environment, you're not worrying about VPNs, so people taking their home machines and connecting to your network and stuff like that. And you really do get to control the experience and any data exfiltration outside of the environment as well, if that's important to you.
Yeah. So BYOD.
BYOD is, yep.
Certainly security conscious businesses, right?
Yeah.
And who isn't anymore, right?
Or even general remote access.
Yeah.
So something that we saw at the beginning of the pandemic a couple of years ago is we saw that a lot of organizations, the firewalls and everything they built were scaled to maybe service about a third of the environment that wasn't in the office.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, 100% of the environment's at home. And they didn't even realize that their hardware firewalls and everything like that had limitations on the CPUs and the entire environment. Like, it was just
throughput, licensing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is a way, I've seen some organizations completely eliminate VPN completely, as this is where this is going to fit. There is no VPN anymore. If you're remote, you are accessing from the terminal-based environment that we have in AVD.
We're kind of in a world too of like some very highly acquisitive companies. There's a lot of integrations of businesses taking place right now. But think about the velocity, right? That you can help get these new businesses assimilated and integrated into your business by using VDI.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mergers and acquisitions. Again, there's been a lot of consolidation over the last couple of years. I don't know if there's always been this much, but I've certainly noticed it a lot.
Across a lot of industries.
Yeah, and we've seen different industries utilize Azure Virtual Desktop as a way to increase momentum there as well. So you have two different companies. They've got all the different stuff, and company A is acquiring company B. Well, as fast as possible, you want company B to be able to utilize the resources and everything that you have at company A. If your AVD is built appropriately, and remember, this is built to scale, taking on an extra 100, 200, 500, a few thousand users is no longer, oh, now I've got to buy all this equipment and scale it out. It's making some modifications in your auto-scaling policies, adding some people to group, getting them inside of your Azure Active Directory, and suddenly, in a matter of weeks, sometimes less, days in some cases, you have enabled this other organization to be able to utilize the resources from the primary organization, basically giving the users two desktop experiences. So there is some consolidation that still needs to be done, what we can do with their servers, what we can do with their endpoints, but it's infinitely easier knowing that now, at a minimum, they can get their work done in the primary tenant now.
So you talk about scaling. Growing. We talked about 1,000 users, 2,000. We have some customers now that are almost approaching 5,000 users, right? But there's some other considerations, right? Even though it's in the cloud, right? There are some considerations around managing that environment and managing the consumption, because we don't want to get into that situation where we have a runaway train of cost, right?
Exactly.
So how do we address that situation?
It's the other side of that coin that we were talking about, where traditional VDI is a huge barrier of entry before you get utilized and see if it was going to work. On this side, you have a completely different set of cares. So if you don't configure things appropriately and things like that, your cost may get out of what you were budgeting, because it is scaling month to month. It's different. So things that you can do, a huge one is adding in that auto scaling. And in Red River, we can help you out with that. And what does that mean? Well, it's always available. for people to log in and utilize. And based off of rules and settings that you've put into place, you have the ability to scale out when needed and scale in. So let's say typically people don't start till 8 a.m., but you might have a couple of people working through the night. Well, you can have a pool of resources that will scale out to 115 session hosts, but it'll scale in to 1 or 2 during the middle of the night. And then you have the policy set up to prepare for that boot storm when everyone's going to be starting work at 8 a.m. to spin up a certain subset of machines to handle it. And then as more sessions are needed, more resources are dynamically allocated, really cutting down on your spend.
Exactly. And these are things that Red River's managed services team can definitely help you with, both in the planning of this and then the execution of it, and in the ongoing kind of watering and feeding and maintenance of this environment.
Yeah, because you changing your resource type, then that's some of the metrics that we automatically pull in when we're looking at it. Do I have enough CPU, and do I have enough RAM? Do I have enough IOPS?
It's not set and forget.
It is definitely not.
Yeah.
But once you do have something tuned in, you can start taking advantage of all kinds of stuff like reserved instances and things like that that the cloud offers to lower the consumption as these.
What is a reserved instance?
So if you know your system is going to be running 24/7 for 1 or 3 years, you just let the cloud vendor know. In this case, it would be Azure, Microsoft. And you will say, I'm going to run this instance 24/7 for the next 3 years. And then in some cases, Microsoft will say, great, you get a 60% discount on running those compute resources. Now, what you want to do is make sure that that resource is going to be running 24/7. So when we were talking about earlier, it scales in and out. You'll look at what does it scale into? What's the lowest amount this pool scales into? You take that instance type, you tell Microsoft you're going to have that running on 24/7, you lock it in, they give you a 60%, up to 60% discount on those instances.
Very cool. Very cool. That's a great way to save some money. Well, could you share with us maybe some of the features that really stand out in your mind? Okay, with AVD.
So AVD is a little bit different than a lot of other out there. And if anyone's ever dabbled in VDI before, typically there's multiple sets of licensing that you have to care about. First, you have to worry about the licensing for the operating system. Then you have to worry about the remote access entitlements. So think RDS CALs is one that not a lot of people think about. And then you have to think about the licensing for that overlay. So whether it's Citrix or something like that, you're paying for that. So there's multiple times you have to pay in order to get this. And on the AVD side, the entitlement is built into a lot of the Microsoft 365 license SKUs. So not all of them. And if you need any help figuring out if you had entitlement, at least the licensing is taken care of. Now that's one. Number two is this is a true Windows 10 experience. So in almost every other solution, unless you're going with a true on-prem VDI solution, what's happening is you have a server operating system that they're installing a desktop experience on top of it. From an end user standpoint, they don't even realize it. They think they're running Windows 10 or now even Windows 11, but it is different. And some of the feature set is different. For example, like if you were to try to set up some features in OneDrive and stuff like that, the syncing capabilities don't work the same on a server operating system as a desktop operating system. And while you can get that in an on-prem VDI, Azure Virtual Desktop is the only place that you can get multi-session Windows 10 or 11. So that is a Windows 10 machine that 15, 20, 30 people can log into depending on the amount of resources, really building the density into the session hosts that are running. There's less servers on the back end for IT to manage. And then you have less instances running. That's another way that you could potentially save some costs there.
Wow, really cool. So I think Microsoft themselves, they fairly recently introduced a service, right? I think called Microsoft 365 Cloud PC.
Yeah,
right?
Or the Windows 365. Yeah.
And that was a little bit confusing for us, for me too. Maybe not you, but for me. What are the differences there?
All right. So
our AVD solution, right, managed versus their solution.
So Windows 365 Cloud PC and Azure Virtual Desktop were actually built by the same team. or the same person was heading that off, and a lot of the team, the vision and everything was the same. And Windows 365 is basically a lot of what they learned on AVD, but then they realized there was users out there that really liked this persistent workspace type thing.
Okay.
So Windows 365 actually it's basically your computer running in the cloud. So you don't have the multi-session host capabilities. In AVD, it's managed by the IT team and stuff like that. And Windows 365 is that easy button, as it were.
It's kind of that one-to-one kind of.
One-to-one relationship.
Yeah.
And you can have a one-to-one relationship on AVD, but it's still being managed by the IT team. With Windows 365 Cloud PC, there's a portal that the user can reset, turn off, turn on their own machine themselves. And Microsoft's really building in a lot of features into Windows 11 and the management with Windows 365 Cloud PC. Some of the things that they're thinking about there is really interesting, where I have my Microsoft Surface here and I log into it, and then as soon as I log in, it boots up my Cloud PC desktop instead of the local desktop and things like that. So there's a lot of places it's going, and it has simplified billing over on the Cloud PC side. Now, with that simplicity that you have over there, you do lose a lot of the flexibility. So if you provision a Windows 365 license and it costs, let's say, $40 for that particular SKU that you have, you're paying that every month, whether that user uses it or not.
Right.
You provisioned it, you're paying for it. On the AVD side, you're only paying for the cloud consumption resources that you're using. So if you have 100 users who aren't ever logging into that AVD pool, because they're not logging in, it's not scaling out to support them, and you're not paying for it. So it's simplicity versus flexibility.
Flexibility, right?
Yeah.
And that's where like a good partner who can come in and help you with that design and planning up front.
Yes, absolutely.
Makes a big difference, because you're better utilizing those resources.
Our job is to take that complexity, so you gain the flexibility and you get the simplicity, because our services are
right. And then on the average, we should see the per seat rates be competitive or lower even than we might see from the Microsoft 365 PC. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's great. Interesting stuff. So with that said, we talked a little bit about the technology, the industry, the market, things like that. How can we help our customers that are interested in this solution?
Yes. So if you're interested in this solution, we've done lots of things there. And then you mentioned it earlier, is getting a proof of concept stood up. Now, this is a service where we'll actually kind of let you taste AVD. The only thing that you'll be responsible for, we'll have to check to make sure you have license entitlements, and that's also something that we can help with. But we'll set up a proof of concept where you're just responsible for a little bit of the Azure spend there. We'll build out the project, and you get to see, how does it look? How does it feel? And then that's when you start sparking interest of, where could this fit inside my environment? And we'll help you workshop that as well. And then taking it over to the pilot phase, when you determine this is something that you want to do, we will get that proof of concept, make sure it's integrated with your existing applications. If you have some resources in Azure, we can attach this to those resources there. And if not, we can get the network connectivity stood up to your current data center and then work through it that way. And really, you get to take advantage of the 2 or so, actually over 2 years now, that we've been pouring into this platform, because there is a level of sophistication required to make sure this is being managed appropriately, and we can help you work through that.
All right, cool. So, Red River Managed Services team. Of course, I introduced myself as Frank Lesko earlier in the call. I'm the Vice President of Sales for services for the company, and these are like these discrete solutions that we develop, through your shop, are the exciting things for us, for sure, because we do a lot of kind of the foundational managed services offerings, and we've been doing that for a couple of decades now, and you and I have been kind of hanging out together for almost that whole time. And it's fun to be able to kind of deliver these types of interesting, valuable kind of solutions to our customers. And Remote Workforce Assist is what we call this one, wrapped around, Azure Virtual Desktop. And I can tell you that we've seen a lot of success with this and a lot of interest, from our client base. And we have a lot of really decent kind of performance on this. So, if you wanted to talk to some customers or some references, things like that, we have plenty of those in place that are successfully leveraging this technology and having a great experience with it. So it's been a pleasure talking to you about this today. And if there's anything else that you wanted to add to our conversation, or?
Well, no, just kind of spearheading off that last question there about what we can help. Like we have a little deck that we can that I can show if you want to go through it.
Yeah, let's walk through a little bit of the PowerPoint presentation that we have.
Yep. All right. So how can we help? Well, what we can do is get on the call. So reach out to our marketing team here, and we can get on the call and we can start discussing and working you through that. So we do a little bit of a discovery for your environment, and we determine, are we going to do a proof of concept, or are we going to do a pilot? And then we let you know what that's going to look like, how long it's going to last, some of the feedback that we had to go through. And then we talk about, if this is successful, where could it potentially go inside of your environment? We build out, execute that proof of concept or pilot in this case. And then we start onboarding you into the systems, try that out as well. So alerts, alarms, things that we're turning on, SOPs, helping your users get into the system and know how to utilize and work it. And then actually seeing what that managed services, what that managed services feels like. So when you guys are having problems, you give a call to the service desk, the service can resolve them. We can show you the KPIs, the SLAs, and everything that we're looking at. I mentioned some of them before, like CPU, RAM, is there enough session hosts available and stuff like that. So we do a lot more than just looking at the environment, though. As I mentioned before, there is a little bit of sophistication that's required when you're doing this sort of thing. So how are we going to get new users in there? How are we going to manage the images if we're going with non-persistent hosts and things like that? How are we going to make sure that the performance is there, the size of the resources, all of that, and also the value optimization and the cost monitoring that we talked about, spinning up new pools for new use case stuff like that. All of that is included in our managed services. And we can go ahead and make sure that this becomes a great success inside your environment for letting users who may not be able to make it into the office feel like they are, and really working out there. So the differences between the proof of concepts and the pilot, we talked about it a little bit. The proof of concept is a nice pre-sales engagement that will come in. There isn't any cost for the labor to get that up and running. It's typically 2 or 3 days we can have it up and running for you, in some cases less, depending on how much velocity there is that you want to have there. We'll let the environment run for a couple of weeks so that your users can get in, test it, feel it, and then we have a conversation at the end of the 2 weeks to see, did you like it? Do you want to actually customize this? So we're not installing custom apps. We'll make sure the Office applications and stuff on there are for you. And we actually do get it inside of your Azure AD tenant so that users are utilizing their credentials that they would to log into Office 365 into this. So there's a little bit of contextualization there, but we're not building out network connection to the existing resources and stuff like
existing line of business applications, things like that, right?
Yep.
Great.
So if you start moving into that pilot offering, this is when there's depending on how many applications and how many different use cases you want to spin this up for inside your environment. Typically, it's for about, you identify 25 users or so inside the environment. We have gone more, we have gone less, but that's typically what our client does. We will actually customize this to your environment. So we'll build the network connectivity out. We'll make sure there's no overlapping VNets. We'll make sure that it's joined to your local Active Directory if that's what you need. And it's utilizing your group policies and things like that. So this tends to go for about 60 days. And in the first 3 to 4 weeks or so, depending on how aggressive you want to be in the pilot, what we do is we have that group of users really dialing in and making sure they can get 100% of their work done. The goal is to get 100% of your work done inside of the VDI environment.
Yep.
So testing applications and making sure all that stuff works. Once everyone's in a good state, that's when we sort of try the service desk. So the Azure monitor alarms and alerts that we set and get put into place. And then these users are actually using the environment. So we ask for some feedback surveys to get that subjective experience from the users. And then we're also using the objective experience by monitoring the resources and dialing in those resources to look nice and good. At the end of it, we have a very good idea as to how much this would cost inside the environment if it were to go at scale. And the reason why there's such a big there's a big swing in how much this could cost is because every environment is going to be different. So you'll have some people who use this for their frontline workers who use 1 or 2 applications or even just a browser. And then you have some users that are like power users. They're going to use this for office applications and so on and so forth. Or even we have seen use cases where architects are using GPU instances in order to run AutoCAD in the cloud, or data analytics shops are taking advantage of being able to have infinite CPUs to crunch their numbers and stuff like that. So it's going to vary depending on your environment, but we can solve a lot of use cases with this, and then we'll dial it in and let you know roughly how much this will be, and then you can see if you have the budget for it moving forward.
That's right. So production ready, we approach this like it's production ready, right? So
exactly.
From a deployment perspective, project managing, onboarding into our service desk, operation for support.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll get the full experience, not only of the technology, but of the service delivery.
Yeah, and what's so great about the pilot is because we're building out the pilot as if it's production, it really is production at that point.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to have that growth and planning meeting and go, well, how do I expand this inside of my environment? We modify some auto-scaling policies, we add some users into groups, and suddenly you can go ahead and utilize it at scale.
Yeah. What have we seen? We've seen like customers start out at that 25 to 100 users. And then like, in what period of time did we see them scale up to like almost 5,000?
I've seen it's pretty crazy because it really does depend on the customer itself. I think one of the most aggressive that I've seen is within 3 weeks of the platform being up, they said, no more with 25 users, we're putting on 250.
Yeah.
So by the end of the first month, those 250 people using it, by the end of the third month, there were over 1,500 people on the platform, and then thousands and thousands. That's how quickly you can scale if this is going to become part of it. But then there's other shops where I know in here we say, oh, 60 days and stuff like that. Those are just general ideas. When we actually get in and learn the environments, the product plan is going to be contextualized. There's some that have very stringent change management requests. And since we need to build network connectivity to establishing resources, it stretches over months. Right. So it can stretch over months if necessary. We can get it done in a very short period of time as well.
Cool. Excellent.
So this slide here, I kind of wanted to show the different options between Windows 365 and Remote Workforce Assist, which is the Red River branded managed service around Azure Virtual Desktop. And both have persistent personal host, and that self-service capability really is a Windows 365 feature and functionality. And the nice thing about it is Remote Workforce Assist, we have the ability to layer in Windows 365 if that's important for you as well. So it's not an either or.
Okay.
It's really looking at that use case for our environment. For example, you may have your general staff are using pools, but then you have IT admins or VIPs or other folks in your organization that you say, you know what? I want to give them the gold experience with Windows 365, being able to control their own resources and so on and so forth. We can work that into our management there. I see. So pooled session host, multi-user, auto-scaling cost flexibility, our service desk, 24/7 NOC, and remote application streaming. These are all things that are unique to Azure Virtual Desktop. And remote application streaming is you have the ability to stream just the application to the end user instead of a full desktop.
Okay.
So if there was like one application, let's say QuickBooks or something like that, and the users wanted to work from their laptops 100% of the time, and they only need Azure Virtual Desktop for QuickBooks. Well, we can publish just QuickBooks, and it will launch on their machine, and it looks like it's running locally, even though it's streaming from the cloud.
Cool. Very cool. All right. That the
yeah, that's the end of the deck. Nice and quick.
Yeah, very nice summary on that. So in wrap up, maybe I'll look over to Corinne and see if we have any questions.
We did. We had a few questions come in. The first one is, you touched on this a little bit, but what are the contractual commitments or licensing requirements?
Right. So I'll go into the licensing requirements. You could talk about contract.
Mm-hmm.
The licensing requirements are, you need to have a plan that includes the entitlements for Azure Virtual Desktop. So that is a Microsoft 365 Business Premium. You also have the F3, the E3, the E5, and there's a few more there. But even if you didn't have a license that had entitlements, there is a SKU you could get that will grant entitlements in the Windows 10 or 11 enterprise SKU will give you entitlements there.
Yeah. From a contractual perspective on the managed services end, we definitely have some flexibility. Most of our customers are entering into 3-year engagements. Okay, some are just 1-year engagements, but we have some flexibility there in terms of how we structure the term length of the agreement. And also, our entire engagement model is flexible, to be quite honest. So, we could carve out pieces of this that make sense to you. We're not coming in to take over your whole desktop experience or desktop responsibilities. This could be just specifically around just this AVD solution. Okay.
The next question was, how do you decide between Azure and Amazon workspaces?
Okay. This really does depend on the organization. So we do both. Amazon Workspaces it's a very similar product to a Windows 365 Cloud PC. So there's that one-to-one relationship from the host that's running in the cloud, in this case inside of Amazon Cloud, and that user. So how do you decide? Where are your resources, and how bought into you are in either cloud? That's basically it. Similar pricing on the two sides. If all of your servers are already sitting inside of Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
We can do remote workforce assist tailored to Amazon and help support you there, so that your end user compute is as close to your resources as possible.
Right.
But we have seen shops that, because of the entitlements and the licensing, and they're able to get a little bit of better deals on the AVD side, because remember, Amazon and Windows 365 Cloud PC, you provision it, you're using it, here's the cost a month. And there's a little bit of things that you could do on the Amazon side, like if someone's not going to use it for, I think it's like 40 to 60 hours, there's like hourly pricing, but it tips over to be, might as well just get it all month long. So that's like a set price, basically. AVD is not a set price, and you get that flexibility of auto scaling, non-persistent, the profile management. No, that's a good one that I didn't mention. Even though a user is going into a multi-session host and they're hitting a different session host each time, the user feels like they're getting the same one, because we're doing some profile management there. And then that profile is containerized and moving between the hosts there. So we have seen people access AWS resources from AVD. If they want to do that, that's fine. But generally, I say get your end user compute as close to your resources they're going to be accessing as possible.
Good advice. Cool.
Perfect. And then the next question was, where do you see VDI going in the next couple of years?
This is a really interesting one, because there's new development on this every day. I think that more people are open to the idea of VDI, especially because in the early 2010s, it got such a bad taste in its mouth. Like, no one wanted to deal with it after having a couple of, I remember doing views and Zen desktops, and I was like, I never want to sell one of these again, just because the complexity of getting that up and running. But now I see more organizations adopting this as part of their strategy. And I'll give an example. We're in talks with some folks who, after Azure Virtual Desktop got up and running, because of supply chain issues and being tired of sending laptops to all their workers all around the country, they said, well, we'll just give you a stipend. Every 3 years, we'll give you $1,000. And you just need to you just do whatever you want with the $1,000 to get your own device that can attach to this.
There you go.
So BYOD has just skyrocketed over the past 2 years. And even if you don't have a BYOD policy, I bet there's people in your company that are using their personal devices to access stuff. So this allows you to have a strategy to bring those users in, allow them to use the devices they're comfortable with, but secure it in a way that you don't care about what they're utilizing.
Exactly.
And then if you look at the roadmap for what Microsoft's doing with Windows Cloud PC and stuff like that, there's crazy stuff like caching of your cloud PC to your environment. So it's bizarre. You'll be able to offline your cloud PC. It'll download the bits that are important to your local device. You work on the plane. When you reconnect to internet, it resyncs to
that's huge.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So the where this is going is, I think more stuff is going to wind up in the cloud ultimately, and we're just kind of at the tipping point of that.
Great. Any other questions?
We got a security question. How's the security for your company's data and the user's data when applying this AVD model?
Yep. So AVD is a terminal-based solution. We've been doing that for years. So you can have it set up. You get to control what type of information can come back to the end device. All processing and data stays in the cloud unless you configure it otherwise. For example, your clipboard, local drives, so on, local printers, so on and so forth. All these are configurable to say, I don't want you to be able to grab a Word document out of the cloud and put it locally. Excuse me. I don't want you to be able to print a secure document to my printer that's sitting here. Sometimes you may want it, sometimes you don't. It depends on the organization. So having the ability to keep all the data inside of the secure space is huge. And think about what the alternative is. The alternative is taking this device and plumbing up a VPN.
Yeah.
Well, now I've just taken this offsite device and I've basically put it on network, right? So just the security there is huge that you've done. And there's even settings and features and stuff where you could set it up so that if someone has a screenshot application on their device and they try to take a screenshot, they just get a black screen or something like that. So there's other things that you can do to help with that security. And this just actually enables it even more so, in my opinion, than a VPN.
Great. All set? Great. Those were great questions. We appreciate that from the audience. Thank you so much. Well, I think this just about wraps up our session today, and we appreciate your attendance. Again, this is Frank Lesko and
Brian Charles
over at Red River Managed Services. We hope you found the Azure Virtual Desktop webinar informational, and if you need to reach us, please be happy to engage in conversation with you to talk about, what VDI might look like in your business, and maybe identify a few business cases where it could work for you. So again, thanks for your participation today.